First contact incident. The Nexus trade station hung in space like a gleaming spider web, its crystalline corridors connecting countless docking ports where ships from across the galaxy conducted their business. It was here, in the most prestigious trading hub of the United Galactic Alliance, that humanity's true nature began to unravel. Senior observer Ixel's sensor stalks wavered as she watched the human maintenance worker scale the outside of the station's primary communication array. The worker, Sarah Chen, moved with casual confidence through the vacuum of space, her tether line floating unused behind her suit. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't safe. This wasn't sane. Worker Chen, Ixel transmitted, her translator struggling to maintain a steady tone. Please secure your tether line immediately. Station regulations require. Can't reach the quantum receiver with the line limiting my movement, Chen responded cheerfully. Don't worry. I've got magnetic boots and grip-enhanced gloves. Did this kind of thing all the time back in the Luna shipyards. Ixel's species, the Verith, had evolved in the gentle embrace of a low-gravity world. The concept of willingly hanging above an endless void with nothing but magnetic forces preventing immediate death was enough to make her inner membranes constrict. She watched in horror as Chen deliberately detached one boot to reach a particularly awkward ankle, essentially standing on one foot at the edge of infinity. The station's AI chimed in. Human vital signs within normal parameters, no indication of distress. That was perhaps the most disturbing part. The human's heart rate and stress hormones showed she was treating this like a routine maintenance call, as if death wasn't literally one small mistake away. Word spread quickly through the station. Within hours, various species gathered at the observation windows, their biology expressing everything from fascination to terror as they watched Chen work. The Meridians, silicon-based beings who prided themselves on their logical approach to the universe, began furiously calculating the probability of survival for such activities. This cannot be standard procedure, Ambassador Krall of the Centaurian Confederation declared, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns of distress. Surely humanity has developed proper maintenance drones for such tasks. Oh, we have drones, Station Chief Rodriguez explained, looking oddly proud. But sometimes you need the human touch. Drones follow programming. Humans improvise. The gathered diplomats exchanged troubled looks. Improvisation in the vacuum of space was not a concept they were comfortable with. Chen's voice crackled over the common channel again. Hey, while I'm up here, I noticed the secondary arrays got some microfractures. Mind if I hop over and take a look? Hop over. Ixel's translator actually glitched on the phrase. Before anyone could object, Chen pushed off from her position, using the momentum to arc gracefully through space toward the secondary array 30 meters away. Several diplomats turned away, unable to watch. A Helioxian representative actually fainted, their levitation field flickering as they sank to the deck. Fascinating. Dr. Zenva of the Galactic Science Academy muttered, their tentacles curling in thought. The human shows no sign of vacuum fear response. No acceleration anxiety. No spatial disorientation. They turned to Rodriguez. Is this individual perhaps specially modified? Genetically enhanced? Rodriguez laughed. Chen. Nah, she's just a regular maintenance worker. Though she did win the station's Zero volleyball tournament last month. The revelation that humans played games in zero gravity for entertainment caused another wave of distress among the gathered aliens. When Chen finally returned to the airlock, she was met with a mixture of relief, scientific curiosity, and barely concealed horror. She removed her helmet, revealing a face flushed with excitement rather than fear. Arrays all fixed, she reported. Found a couple other issues while I was out there. Took care of those too. Oh, and I got some great photos of that nebula formation off the port bow. Beautiful view from up there. The statement caused Dr. Zenva to rapidly tap notes into their datapad. Subject engages in recreational observation while performing high-risk maintenance tasks. Displays multiple attention focuses in life-threatening conditions. Remarkable. The incident report filed that day marked the beginning of a much larger investigation. As the various species representatives returned to their quarters, they began sending urgent messages to their homeworlds. The human question could no longer be ignored. Humanity had joined the galactic community 3 years ago, and they had seemed reasonable enough at first. Yes, they came from what was classified as a high-stress world, but so did many species. Yet there was something different about them, something that didn't quite fit any known pattern. They didn't just survive in hostile conditions, they thrived in them. They didn't just overcome obstacles, they seemed to enjoy the process, and most disturbing of all, they appeared to have no concept of just how unusual this made them. As Ixel prepared her official report that night, she found herself struggling to properly categorize what she'd witnessed. How did one explain to the Galactic Council that a species treated near-death experiences as routine maintenance, that they turned survival situations into sporting events? The next morning, the Council would receive hundreds of similar reports from across known space. The human question was about to become the human problem, and the galaxy's carefully ordered civilization was not prepared for the answer. The investigation begins. The Grand Archive of the Galactic Council was normally a place of hushed contemplation. Today, it echoed with the agitated movements of the Special Investigation Committee on Human Affairs. Dr. Zenva's tentacles danced across multiple holographic displays, each showing different aspects of human behavior and physiology. "Consider this footage," they announced to the assembled committee members. The central display showed a mining operation on Kepler-4, a heavy-gravity world. A cave-in had trapped several workers, including 2 humans and a Draconid engineer. The humans were attempting what the committee had initially assumed was an escape attempt. Instead, they were moving deeper into the unstable tunnels. "They are going the wrong way," Ambassador Krull noted, his crystalline form pulsing with confusion. "No," corrected security analyst Fren, her scales shifting color as she studied the footage. "They're going toward the Draconid, into a section of tunnel rated at 4 times standard gravity." The committee watched as the humans navigated the crushing pressure, using mining equipment in ways it was never designed for, creating support structures from debris. They reached the Draconid, who had already entered protective hibernation due to the extreme conditions. "Notice their vital signs." Dr. Zenva highlighted a data stream. "Elevated, certainly, but nowhere near critical. They're operating at what they call peak performance, under conditions that would kill most species." The display shifted to another incident. A human diplomatic vessel had suffered a critical reactor failure. Standard procedure was to abandon ship. The humans had other ideas. "They sent engineers into the radiation zone," Vren reported, her scales now a deep purple of disbelief. "With minimal shielding. The engineers' only protection was something they called a rad suit, primitive protection by our standards." "Surely they died," Krell interjected. "They suffered what humans term moderate radiation exposure. They were treated and returned to duty within their standard month. They saved the ship." The committee sat in uncomfortable silence as more evidence accumulated. Humans fighting fires without environmental suits. Humans testing experimental FTL drives. Humans deliberately entering hostile environments for what they termed scientific research, or more disturbingly, adventure. "There's more," Dr. Zenva continued. "We've been analyzing their entertainment content." The displays filled with images that made several committee members recoil. Humans climbing sheer cliff faces with minimal equipment. Humans diving into ocean trenches. Humans leaping from high altitudes with nothing but fabric to slow their fall. "They do this for pleasure." Ambassador Krell's voice contained harmonics of pure bewilderment. "Indeed, and they're young. Look at how they train them." New footage showed human children in what the committee learned was called a playground. Young humans climbed tall structures, swung at dangerous heights, and engaged in high-speed pursuit games that frequently ended in collision. "Their medical records show frequent minor injuries," Dr. Zenva noted. But rather than modify the behavior, they encourage it. They call it building resilience. The evidence continued to mount. Human emergency responders routinely entered situations that other species' AI systems classified as unsurvivable. Human scientists conducted experiments that skirted the edge of safety protocols. Even human artists pushed physical and mental boundaries in pursuit of what they called expression. There's an underlying pattern, Vren announced, her analytical mind putting the pieces together. They don't just survive these conditions. They learn from them, adapt, come back stronger. Impossible, Krell declared. Evolution doesn't work that way. Species adapt over generations, not within a single lifetime. Humans do, Dr. Zenva corrected. Their cellular structure shows remarkable plasticity. Their neural pathways reorganize in response to stress. Even their bones and muscles adapt to changing conditions. The committee spent hours analyzing more data. Human medical practices alone caused several members to request breaks. The concept of surgery, deliberately cutting open a body to repair it, was particularly disturbing. Yet humans had developed this practice before they even achieved spaceflight. We must consider the implications, Vren finally said, her scales shifting to the deep blue of serious contemplation. If humans are this adaptable, this resilient, what are the security concerns? Current containment protocols are based on standard environmental threats, Dr. Zenva acknowledged. But humans, they don't just endure hostile environments. They actively seek them out. Our barriers may be meaningless to them. The committee's report was taking shape, but it raised more questions than it answered. How had humanity developed these traits? What were the limits of their adaptability? And perhaps most importantly, what would they do with these abilities? There's one more factor to consider, Vren added, pulling up new data. Their response to perceived threats. The displays showed various crisis scenarios. In each case, humans exhibited what the committee termed escalating capability. The more severe the threat, the more extreme their response became. Yet their decision-making remained remarkably clear. They become more efficient under pressure, Dr. Zenva observed, more focused. Most species experience degraded performance as stress increases. Humans improve. The implications were staggering. A species that not only survived crisis but thrived in it. A species that turned obstacles into opportunities. A species that seemed to have no concept of impossible. As the committee prepared to present their findings to the full council, they knew they were only scratching the surface of the human question. But one thing was becoming clear. The galaxy's understanding of what was possible would never be the same. The breaking point. The Galactic Council's emergency session was interrupted by urgent news from the Epsilon sector. The Meridian Research Station orbiting a neutron star had suffered catastrophic damage from an unexpected radiation burst. Evacuation protocols had failed. Standard rescue operations were impossible due to the extreme conditions. 3 human ships responded to the distress call. The council chamber's main display showed the unfolding situation. The human vessels, small research ships not rated for rescue operations, approached the dying station. The council members watched in horror as radiation levels climbed beyond survivable limits. They must retreat, High Counselor Sand declared, their bioluminescent patterns flashing warning colors. The radiation will kill them all. Captain Maya Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Horizon had other ideas. Her voice came through the emergency channel, calm despite the situation. We're detecting 27 life signs on the station. Meridians can survive in hibernation for another 40 minutes in these conditions. That's enough time. Enough time for what? Sand demanded. Your ship's shields cannot withstand. We're not using the ships, Rodriguez interrupted. We're going in ourselves. The council chamber erupted in protest. Even the most advanced environmental suits couldn't protect against such intense radiation. The humans would be dead before they reached the station. But the humans had already launched their shuttles. Dr. Zenva, present as a scientific advisor, activated their data analysis arrays. They've modified their radiation suits, they reported, tentacles writhing in agitation. They're using experimental shield technology. Untested technology. The Council watched as human rescue teams cut their way into the station. Their vital signs were transmitted in real time. Elevated heart rates, stress hormones surging, radiation exposure climbing steadily. Yet they moved with purpose, methodically working their way through the station's corridors. First group of survivors secured, Rodriguez reported, loading them into Shuttle 1. Teams 2 and 3 proceeding to lower levels. The station's structure groaned under the increasing stress. Portions of the outer hull were already beginning to fail. The humans ignored the danger, continuing their rescue operation with what seemed like impossible speed and precision. How are they moving so fast in those conditions? Security Chief Wren wondered aloud, her scales shifting through patterns of disbelief. The gravity fluctuations alone should make coordination impossible. The answer came from the humans' own communication channel, just like the disaster drills back home. One rescuer said to another, "Remember that reactor incident in New Jakarta? Same principle, different gravity." They had trained for this. Not this exact scenario, but similar ones. They had deliberately exposed themselves to extreme conditions, learned to function in them, prepared for the impossible. The station's reactor warnings shifted from critical to terminal. The humans' response was to move faster. Final group of survivors secured, Rodriguez announced, beginning retreat. But the station's docking systems had failed. The shuttles couldn't hard dock for transfer. The humans would have to spacewalk with their rescued meridians, crossing gaps of open space filled with lethal radiation. They didn't hesitate. The council chamber fell silent as they watched humans carry hibernating meridians through space, forming chains to pass the crystalline beings from one point to another. Their radiation exposure was now well beyond what their medical databases classified as lethal. Last survivor aboard, Rodriguez reported. Her voice was strained but steady. All ships, maximum thrust. Let's get clear before this thing blows. The human vessels pulled away just as the station's reactor failed. The explosion lit up the sector, a new star born from destruction. When the glare faded, 3 human ships emerged, their hulls scorched but intact. Inside, 27 Meridians and 15 humans were alive. The Council's medical experts immediately began analyzing the humans' condition. The radiation exposure should have killed them. Instead, they were conscious, coordinated, and already beginning treatment protocols they had apparently prepared in advance. Their cellular damage is extensive, Dr. Zenva reported, studying the medical data. But look at this. Their bodies are already adapting, repairing radiation damage in ways we thought impossible. They've activated emergency medical protocols that suggest they expected this level of exposure. They knew, Vren realized, her scales turning the deep purple of revelation. They knew they would receive lethal radiation doses. They knew, and they went anyway. The Council's investigation had revealed humanity's unusual capabilities. But this incident showed something more. Not just their physical resilience or their ability to operate in extreme conditions, but their willingness, their drive, to push beyond normal limits. As the human ships limped toward the nearest medical facility, the Council received new reports. Similar incidents were occurring across the galaxy. Humans responding to crises other species deemed unsurvivable. Humans developing solutions that ignored conventional safety limits. Humans treating the impossible as merely inconvenient. The galaxy was changing. The presence of humans had introduced a new variable into every calculation of risk and possibility. They weren't just surviving in a dangerous universe. They were actively engaging with it, challenging it, reshaping the boundaries of what was considered possible. And they were teaching others to do the same. The Council's worst fears were being realized. Humanity wasn't just a potential threat because of their physical capabilities. They were dangerous because they were showing the galaxy that limits could be broken, that the impossible was merely difficult, that evolution wasn't just about survival, it was about growth. The breaking point had arrived. But it wasn't the humans who were breaking. Understanding the impossible. The Galactic Science Academy's main hall was filled beyond capacity. Scientists from 100 worlds had gathered for what was being called the Human Question Conference. Dr. Zenva stood at the central podium, their tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep scientific confusion. Traditional classification systems have failed us, they began. Humans defy our understanding of evolutionary development. They are not simply adaptable. They actively seek adaptation. They do not simply learn. They deliberately pursue knowledge through what they call experimentation, often at great personal risk. The assembled scientists watched as new data streamed across the massive displays. Human medical records, stress response patterns, cellular regeneration rates, all impossible by conventional standards. Consider their sleeping patterns, Dr. Zenva continued. Most species require consistent rest cycles. Humans can alter theirs at will. They call it pulling an all-nighter or catching up on sleep, concepts that should be biologically impossible. A Helioxian researcher raised their crystalline appendage. Could they be artificial constructs? Enhanced beings? No, Dr. Zenva replied. We've analyzed their genetic structure extensively. They are entirely natural. This is their base state. The implications caused a wave of uneasy movement through the audience. Natural evolution shouldn't produce a species with such flexible biological parameters. Yet here they were. Their learning mechanisms are equally disturbing. A new voice added. Professor Kix of the Neural Sciences Institute stepped onto the stage. Their exoskeleton clicked as they interfaced with the display system. Humans don't just learn from success. They learn from failure. More importantly, they deliberately seek out failure as a learning tool. They call it practice or training. They intentionally place themselves in difficult situations to improve their capabilities. The display showed human training facilities, military exercises conducted in extreme conditions, scientists working with dangerous materials, athletes pushing their bodies beyond normal limits. But surely there are limits, someone called from the audience. Physical constraints that cannot be overcome. Professor Kix's exoskeleton shifted to a hue indicating scientific excitement. That's the fascinating part. When humans encounter a limit, they don't accept it. They study it, test it, and inevitably they find ways around it. The evidence was compelling. Human history was filled with examples of impossible achievements. Flight, space travel, quantum communication. Each time they encountered a barrier, they treated it not as a limit but as a challenge. Their information networks contain a phrase. Dr. Zenva added, "Hold my beer." It appears to be a preface to attempting something considered impossible or inadvisable. The conference continued for days. Experts from every field tried to understand how a single species could exhibit such extreme characteristics. Their physical attributes alone were remarkable. Able to survive in temperature ranges that would kill most species, capable of recovering from injuries that should be fatal, adaptable to almost any environment. But it was their psychological makeup that truly set them apart. Humans didn't just survive. They explored. They didn't just adapt. They innovated. They didn't just exist. They questioned everything about their existence. Perhaps we're approaching this wrong, suggested Dr. Lan, a specialist in xenosociology. We're trying to understand humans through our own evolutionary framework. But what if their evolution followed a different path entirely? The idea sparked intense debate. Traditional evolutionary theory suggested that species developed to fit their environment. Humans seem to have developed to change their environment instead. Look at their planet, Dr. Lan continued. Earth isn't just a high-stress world. It's a world of constant change. Seasons, natural disasters, climate shifts. The humans didn't evolve to suit any one condition. They evolved to handle all conditions. The conference's findings were both fascinating and troubling. Humanity's adaptability wasn't just physical or mental. It was comprehensive. They could alter their behavior, their thinking, even their biology, to meet new challenges. More importantly, they seem to enjoy doing so. They have a concept called pushing the envelope, Professor Kix reported. It means deliberately operating at the edge of known possibilities. Most species avoid such boundaries. Humans actively seek them out. The implications for galactic society were enormous. Humans weren't just another spacefaring species, they were a catalyst for change. Their presence alone forced other species to reconsider what was possible. Reports were already coming in from worlds with human populations. Local species were beginning to adopt human approaches to problems. The concept of impossible was being challenged across the galaxy. We must accept a difficult truth, Dr. Zenva concluded. Our understanding of biological and social evolution must be revised. Humans aren't an anomaly. They're a demonstration of possibilities we never considered. As the conference drew to a close, the scientists faced an uncomfortable reality. They couldn't classify humans because humans refused to remain classified. They couldn't predict human behavior because humans constantly invented new behaviors. They couldn't define human limits because humans didn't believe in limits. The galaxy was changing, and at its heart was a species that treated change not as a threat, but as an opportunity. The question wasn't whether humans were dangerous. It was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity represented. The possibility that everything they thought they knew about life, evolution, and the universe itself might need to be reconsidered. The age of certainty was over. The age of human possibility had begun. The new normal. One standard galactic year after the Meridian rescue incident, the Nexus trade station had changed. Where once there were clearly segregated species zones, now there was integration. The station's central promenade hosted an unlikely sight. A Draconid engineering team was learning human rock climbing techniques on a newly installed practice wall. Your exoskeleton provides excellent anchor points, Sarah Chen explained, the same maintenance worker who had once terrified the station with her spacewalk. She guided a Draconid's clawed appendage to a hold. Use that natural advantage. The Draconid, initially skeptical of this recreational endurance training, now moved with growing confidence. Around them, other species watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. The old response to human activities was slowly giving way to curiosity. In the station's medical bay, Dr. Zenva worked alongside human physicians, studying how different species responded to stress and adaptation. The formerly pristine facility now featured what humans called a physical therapy center, where injured beings of all species learned human techniques for recovery and rehabilitation. Remarkable, Dr. Zenva noted, watching a Helioxian practice movement exercises. A year ago, they would have remained in crystalline stasis until fully healed. Now they're actively participating in their recovery. The changes weren't limited to the station. Across the galaxy, the initial panic about humanity's capabilities had evolved into something more complex. Some species still maintained their distance, but others had begun to embrace human methodologies, if not their exact approaches. The Meridians, perhaps influenced by their rescue, had established the first cross-species crisis response training program. They couldn't match human endurance or adaptability, but they could learn from human preparation techniques and problem-solving approaches. We don't need to become human, Ambassador Krell explained to the Council during a progress review. We need to understand how they think. Their greatest strength isn't their physical capability. It's their refusal to accept limitations without questioning them. The Council chamber itself had been redesigned. Gone were the rigid hierarchical seating arrangements. In their place was what humans called a roundtable format, encouraging open discussion and dynamic problem-solving. Security Chief Wren, her scales now permanently tinted with the blue of adaptation, presented her latest findings. Species-wide panic incidents have decreased by 60%. As exposure to humans increases, other species are developing their own ways of handling stress and uncertainty. The data showed interesting patterns. Planets with human populations were showing increased rates of innovation and adaptation. Not because other species were becoming more human-like, but because they were learning to explore their own potential in new ways. Their catalysts, High Counselor Xan observed, their bioluminescence pulsing thoughtfully. Their presence forces us to question our assumptions. Some find this threatening. Others find it liberating. Education systems across the galaxy were being reformed. The human concept of hands-on learning was being adapted for different species' capabilities. The idea that learning should involve controlled risk and practical experience was spreading, modified to suit each species' natural limitations and advantages. Even entertainment was changing. The human practice of simulation gaming had been adopted by many species, allowing them to safely experience and learn from challenging scenarios. The Verith, once terrified of spacewalks, now trained their maintenance crews in virtual environments inspired by human practices. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed itself. The human question had evolved into something larger. What else had they assumed was impossible simply because they had never questioned it? Research outposts reported increased funding and participation. The concept of pushing boundaries had taken root, though each species interpreted it differently. The Helioxians weren't about to start free-climbing mountains, but they had begun exploring the limits of their crystalline forms in ways they never had before. Humans call it the ripple effect. Dr. Zenva explained during a xenosociology conference. One species' actions influencing others in unexpected ways. We're not becoming human. We're becoming more fully ourselves because they showed us it was possible. The galaxy was learning to live with humanity, but more importantly, it was learning from them. Not their specific traits or capabilities, but their fundamental approach to existence. The idea that limits existed to be understood, tested, and sometimes transcended. Back on the Nexus trade station, Sarah Chen finished her training session with the Draconid engineering team. As they discussed the experience, a minor hull breach alert sounded from a lower level. Once, this would have triggered an automatic evacuation. Now, mixed species response teams moved with practiced coordination to address the issue. That's the real change, Chen observed to Dr. Zenva as they watched the teams work. Not that we're here, but that we're all working together, learning from each other. Humans aren't special. We're just differently adapted. Everyone has something to teach. The galaxy hadn't become human, but it had become something new. A place where possibility wasn't defined by what had always been, but by what could be imagined and achieved. The human question hadn't been solved. It had evolved into a greater understanding that every species had untapped potential, waiting to be explored. As the station's lights dimmed for night cycle, a group of young beings from various species gathered in the observation dome. They weren't separated by traditional species boundaries or historical prejudices. Instead, they shared stories of their own small victories against what they had once thought impossible. The galaxy had changed, not because humanity had forced it to, but because they had shown that change was possible. The new normal wasn't about being human. It was about every species discovering what they could become when they stopped accepting limitations without question. The age of isolation was over. The age of mutual growth had begun.